Welcome, Gus and Lillian from Common Opera. Super excited to see the inner workings of your latest game. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, it's not done, the current game.
Cool.
Samantha.
Yeah, awesome. Can you give us a little bit of introduction about yourself and the game, and what are we looking at today?
I'm Gus. I'm, I guess, one third of this team, Common Opera, along with my associates Lillian and Ben, are third members in Los Angeles. I personally got into games a few years ago from doing a lot of like illustration stuff and thinking I was going to do like comics and or music, and then kind of meeting a bunch of people who did games and starting to do those things for their games and kind of realizing like, oh, this is cool and like kind of more holistically enjoyable for me than either of these elements on their own, and then kind of teaching myself the rest of it and finding a team of people who like had similar thought processes and stuff and being like, oh, okay, cool, we can make something really cool together. And it has kind of just become my main thing since then. Like, I don't really do any of the other stuff in isolation anymore. I just do various iterations of or tangential things to making video games now.
Cool. And what would you say your role is in Common Opera?
I primarily do the art direction, like visual stuff. I make most of the assets. I can do a little bit of coding to the extent where I am able to like not really do the like big systemic things, but can like implement little stuff and like make things work depending on the project. This game is something that Ben had started on his own, and kind of the rest of us joined in at a later date. So a lot of the like architecture is very densely like in his own personal language, because he didn't realize at first that anyone else would have to work within it. So for this project, I do less coding than I have on others, but it's a spectrum of my little amount that I can contribute. And then we all kind of do the design stuff together. We just like, I don't know, having three brains with very different priorities bouncing through a problem, I think, is a much more effective way to solve it than to have any one person be some like design genius or whatever.
Yeah, I'm super interested in the collaborative aspect of it all, and let's get to that. But first, Lillian, you want to also introduce yourself and your role in Common Opera?
I'm Lillyan. I'm the producer of Pariah Interactive and and one third of Common Opera. I primarily do the audio, so that's like sound effects and music. I'm a third of the game design, and sometimes you chip in a little bit here or there with narrative and some like UI designs and some art directions and some art suggestions, a little bit here and there. I got into games through like a DIY means, because I used to be into DIY music, and a good friend of ours was like, can you put your freaky songs in my freaky games? And so I did that, and I'd been like working in like publishing before this, but then I was working on this art dictionary, but I was like, I want to make the art more than like be behind the scenes or whatever. So and then I just started like working with either like Baby Castles or NYU Game Center students on their projects just for free, messing around, learning, and then quickly just like got a little more involved with more and more intense projects. And I think it's cool that neither Gus or I went to school for game design, and neither of us have a master's in any art school.
But that said, it's really nice that Ben did and does, because he has all of these like points of reference and things that we just would be completely blind to. So it's cool to know that you can be successful without those things, but also successful would be.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like Ben is the wise beacon that just like knows a lot of things and is really patient, and I'm really grateful for that. And I feel like a wretched game design orphan sometimes, but if it works, it works. I
Yeah.
really appreciate the chemistry of the three of us working together. I feel like, especially recently, every meeting I come out of it feeling very like exhilarated about like, oh, that was good. We did some, we got some stuff down, and like we came up with some good next steps and ideas and whatnot. So it's cool to have that wavelength and that like three-way complementariness. And it's hard to have that too. So
Yeah.
I think it's something special.
Yeah, it's definitely trial and error finding the people that you work well with, and
that's okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So how did it all come together? How did you three, I guess, find each other and decide like, yeah, let's make games together,
We're an offshoot of a previous organization called JRPG Combat Systems, which was a lot speedier, a lot faster, a lot more prototype based. And the three of us were mainly like more concerned with like, I think the three of us were like more open to working on these larger, bigger projects that took a longer time,
Mm-hmm.
and like possibly putting them out there in the world, whether through festivals or like, through conventional means of like acquiring a game like on Steam, on itch, and just like we're open to the idea of like starting a company and a collective.
Also, I feel like the other group was much more explicitly like a collective more than like a team, where all of the work was kind of individuals working in their little silos and then like distributing together,
Mm-hmm.
versus kind of we all sort of got into the sense of like, oh, we want to make something bigger that can't really be made practically by one person, that we can like channel energy into one like unified goal.
Yeah.
It's like kind of three people inside of the like one robot sort of.
Yeah.
I would say like Ben is the lead on this project, in that it was his idea, but like I feel like this project is probably the first one where the three of us are like very heavily all co-owning the creative direction, which is always an interesting experiment.
I think it's definitely like really healthy to have, for any given project, to be like, okay, this person is the director, so if there ever is like just fundamental philosophical disagreements, we can just have an understanding of like, well, but
what is the
ultimately
original
like
intent?
we cede to Ben on this project because like you don't want to be in a situation where everyone's like, but it's like, I don't know, having three people is nice because there's always a like tiebreaker if there is some kind of deadlock like that, but also having the mindset of like because it's not like a leadership position, it's like director, and the understanding that that's just as much just like a labor task as anyone else, but that the labor that task does happens to be like making final decisions on certain things.
Yeah.
Like Ben doesn't write our paychecks or anything, but it's still like understood like he has a certain type of authorial voice in this that only works because he also trusts all of our input on it, that it's not just shutting out everything else, but is like pulling the final trigger informedly by everyone else's.
Yeah, and like I would, Gus, even though you mentioned yourself as like secondary programmer in this project, you have definitely like led and directed like your own Common Opera projects too, and we've like sort of latched onto them too as well.
Oh yeah, well part of the idea of the team is that we kind of would like to be able to rotate like every release will be directed by someone different, so it's not just like, oh, Ben's heading the ship. I feel like a thing we kind of actively have talked about and try to do is to sort of push back against the very like cult of personality, like just mythos that so much video game stuff has, where it's like, oh, this studio is led by this person who like is ultimately responsible for all the cool things that they've made, where it's like we're all kind of interchangeable. Like I try not to present as like a public figure anyway, like but just like I don't know, this sense of like everyone is just as important as everyone else, and there's kind of this sort of intentional smokescreen publicly of like,
we're just a group of people.
Like you can like you communicate with the Common Opera email address, and like you'll be talking to a person, but it's not like
Yeah.
Ben at commonopera.com, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Common opera is like, the title itself is like, I think the word common is, I think both words are very important here, but like common meaning like, you know, the thing that we all share in common, the commonality of sharing. An opera meaning like the plural of opus, which is work. So like common work or common works. Yeah, it's just like it kind of just like speaks a little bit to this like co-ownership of this this collective, but also just maybe games that are about themes that maybe anyone that are maybe ordinary or anyone can relate to, and maybe but opera is a sort of like fancified word, and like seeing those normal things through like a more fancified lens, or like making DIY games with like an elaborate sensibility. That's like sort of a little bit behind the naming of the collective.
Like all the things we try to aspire to, like everything being like very dense and like precise with meaning, where it's like the name is the like common opera being like mutual works, but also like ordinary like opera in the sense that like the idea of opera as like the, what's the word, like the Gesamtkunstwerk, where it's like the art form that kind of subsumes every other art form into itself, is like the set design and like the singing and the music and the visuals and everything, and like
Costumes and
the idea that kind of video games are like the like working person's contemporary version of that, where it's like it can contain basically any other art form within itself, but it is sort of also this like seen as this very like utilitarian thing in a lot of ways.
work. You work for your work.
It's not art, it's work.
It's true. Wow, okay, that's great. Thanks for the detailed description of the name. I think it's a really good name, and I think it's very memorable, and I love the name. I'm glad we got to touch on that a little bit. But let's get into a tragic accidental still life. So what can you tell us a bit about the game? Maybe we can dive right in and look at what you're hoping to show us today. You have the keyboard and mouse.
Sure. Yeah. A tragic accidental still life is a 3-part narrative arcade adventure game, I would say. You are a kleptomaniac ambulance driver who's trying to escape the miseries of your life by stealing things and daydreaming your way across the suburbs and prison in the United States. It's not a very elegant way to put it, but it's a premise.
Oh my god.
Let's see.
Oh, you're looking for the game view?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got you.
Oh, because we're stuck in scenes.
I do everything on the trackpad, so I like have this whole set of
You
shortcuts.
flick with your gestures. Yeah, it's all good. We'll just do that. There we go. We'll maximize this.
We can scale it up too.
There's a lot of, this game is just full of stuff that may or may not ever be noticed, but one thing is that Ben spent so long getting all this like pixel perfect, where it like the game detects the size of the screen it's being rendered on, and then like makes the screen of the game like the largest multiple of whatever the like resolution of the screen is, so that it actually like whatever, like the sense of trying to emulate the like aesthetic of those like old, this is very specifically
Pixel perfect.
like branching off of the aesthetic of Final Fantasy VI was like a major touchstone for this. And so the idea of like, well, if you're going to use that as an aesthetic, like for us at least, we're kind of very detail oriented and want to like actually nail it and like not have the like, oh, some pixels are actually 1.5 pixels, and like, because it doesn't ultimately matter, but like I can tell. And in something that I've worked on, I will judge it always more harshly than something that someone else has made, and it will bother me. So this is like, in this section of the game, you're just driving through the suburbs, basically responding to 911 calls, and you're going to these houses and finding these people collapsed and like reviving them.
Wow, these arrows are fun. They're just all over the place.
Let's yeah.
Wow, I love the animation.
Thank you.
Yeah, the arrows are overwhelming, and they were like a point of. I remember earlier being like, we have too many arrows. This is too many arrows, and then Ben and Gus being like, well, you're a kleptomaniac. You just want to touch everything. You want to go in and be like, look at all this stuff I can steal. And then I was like, fine, we can keep the arrows.
Like, the idea is supposed to sort of be that the UI, the way that like in the game a UI is like kind of creates this compulsion of like, oh, this is what I have to do next.
Mm-hmm.
To almost sort of reverse that and have the UI like be communicating a compulsion that like the player character is supposed to like have on their own. So it's like when an emergency comes, the arrow starts pointing you there, and so that's like, oh, this is the thing I have to do. But then when you get into the house and suddenly there's a million arrows pointing to all these like objects, it's supposed to kind of give you that same like, oh, this is just what I have to do. That like when you have that kind of urge to do something, it's just like just as much as like duty or whatever will feel like, oh, this is just the obvious thing I have to do. It's supposed to kind of communicate that. And there's trying to get this kind of like friction of like, you know, in one of those old JRPGs, you're always just like walking into people's houses and like breaking a jar, like opening a thing, like picking something up.
Yeah.
And it's just normal, and like kind of trying to play with this a bit. Like, this is definitely very much in conversation with both aesthetically and like mechanically a bunch of other types of games historically.
Yeah.
Ben is very encyclopedic about a lot of different like historical game stuff, and it very much shows in sort of how he approaches different design questions. I wanted to show in this house, but there's nobody else here. But the punchline to that idea of like, oh, you just walk into someone's house and take something is that actually when you pick something up here and you walk in another NPC's line of sight, they'll like stop you and yell at you and be like, you can't just take something from our house. And like, you'll get kicked out of the house and you'll get in trouble.
Yeah. But there's no NPC in that house, so.
Yeah, there's no one to catch you.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I feel like the UI like has an overpresence sometimes, and that's just supposed to be like, this is what you're supposed to do. Oh my gosh, your job. And then, oh my gosh, like all these things I want to steal. And then sometimes we selectively decide to vanish the UI.
Yeah, that's.
And we do that when like you pick up an object. And what we do is like, when you pick up an object to steal it, we like vanish all the UI, and that's supposed to incentivize you to like feel relaxed. The timer disappears. You're just like, I have the thing in my hand that I want to steal. And then you're compelled to bring it home.
When you pick up the arrow, everything disappears except for the like nice yellow arrow, which is pointing you back to your house.
Yeah.
And then when you get into your house, like all the UI goes away.
Yeah. So, including like this border, which I don't think is noticeable enough right now.
This game is very much still in development, and there's a lot that might change. We're in talks about changing this whole like driving mechanic. There's a lot that
this is the
may or
player
may not look the same.
Reaching their home.
Yeah.
So that's that teddy bear we stole earlier. The UI just vanished.
Mm-hmm.
And if there were audio playing, there's like a kind of theme song playing. There's just like ambient interactable animations.
You can just light the stove and can you cook?
I mean, there's nothing in the freezer.
No cooking.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, you couldn't do this in an NPC's house.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Is that
which
Idaho?
state is this?
I was trying to figure that out. Is that
Oklahoma.
Idaho? Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm. Idaho is higher.
I don't know much about
Is that where you are right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's randomly chosen when you play it.
Oh, so
Yeah.
you could be anywhere.
You could start off in any state necessarily.
Nice.
So
Whoa, did that? Whoa.
yeah.
Something happened, right? There's more rugs and more beds.
Yeah. This is another thing that's...
It's more obvious when you can hear the audio, but like there's a very like
Yeah.
comfortable song playing.
Uh-huh.
And what happens is when the player's in their home environment, the UI goes away. You don't worry about all these stats. You have all this stuff you stole, and you just have like an ambient mind that likes to like daydream and like think about things. So the house is supposed to reflect this like state of just like imagining, which is supposed to contrast against like your daily job, the UI's return. So
Yeah,
and
the
then-
big
oh yeah, go for it.
the big like themes of this game are like sort of this interplay between like compulsion and like obligation, I guess, versus like sort of that like internality of like the escape of like sort of just wandering, like letting your mind wander and daydreaming and stuff. Nobody else is in this house either, so we can't
Yeah, we don't have enough NPCs.
show you getting caught, but we can show you what happens afterwards.
Oh, steal a crown.
Oh, yeah. Or the incense.
Oh, the skull is cool.
The skull's fine.
The crown is where it's at.
You'll see in a moment
All right.
why the crown is where it's at.
So it is where it's at. Oh wow, you're right.
That was
there.
quite close to home.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's kind of just like Act 1 is just this loop of going to people's houses, rescuing them, and or stealing things.
Mhm.
If you get caught when you're trying to steal things, it kind of like gives you a strike, and if you get 3 strikes, it sends you to this other like sort of like detention almost.
Mhm.
And then
Ooh.
you like play back through the thing. Initially, the idea was that this whole game should be sort of like a... There have been a lot of weird design questions in this where like
Mhm.
in the initial intent, this like Act 1, which is a third of the game, was supposed to kind of like masquerade as the whole game, where like it's just this like endless high score thing where you can only really progress by losing.
Oh, okay.
And if someone does a good job, they'll just stay in this forever and keep on like racking points up and like having a decent time in this like just endless like rescue thing.
Mhm.
Unless you get caught enough times. And that kind of like, we sort of realized while people were testing it, like, while that's cool in theory, a lot of people just did well at the game and never saw anything beyond that section of it.
Yeah.
So we kind of made stealing 3 items. You kind of, in the real UI, you can see everything sort of on these like 3 strike systems. Stealing 3 items now kind of like triggers the thing that would have happened if you got caught too many times previously, which is
Cop.
the police show up at your door and they change the screen size and send you to prison.
Does it?
Oh.
Jealous UIs.
Yeah, something's fucked up here.
So will we have lost all the items that we stole?
Oh, probably. Then I'm gonna...
We can just navigate to Act 2.
Yeah, but I'm gonna...
It's so fun to take a peek under the hood and see the
Yeah.
engine, and you're tweaking the values to get back to the same game state.
We wanted the crown.
Maybe something else first, and then
Okay.
to provide context.
Right.
Mirror?
An interesting idea, Mr. Tapan. We'll try out the mirror as you have requested. I think it's because we didn't load in like from the title. Like maybe if you just load into each scene individually, it like doesn't have the stuff set up for the continuity.
Should we zoom in? Or-
Yeah. A disclaimer is that in the last like few days, we've talked about this section of the game like changing significantly potentially.
Yeah. I feel like this might be an interesting thing to talk about, but like I feel like this is kind of relatable with some of the Thousand Deaths work stuff we were doing, and I told this to the team too, where just there's a moment where we were having sort of, you'll see in this iteration what we had previously done, which is that jail is a number of, you have to serve jail time, and there's a number of days that you have to serve, and each day has a routine of like how many things you have to do every day. And the routine cycles through like 3 mini games, and the mini games are tedious because it's jail or whatever. And then we sort of just like recently had like a classic existential crisis about like what is this game turned into, and like we have these mini games, were they fun, like what was the point of these mini games, like what was the point of the act in the first place. This kind of this moment where you're working so hard in like a specific mini game to get the mini game working, and then for a second you stop and you try to see the forest and the trees, and you're like looking at the forest and you're like, what forest? So this is very structured and cyclical, and every day has its like cafeteria, yard, and factory work scene. But it's since then going to change, and we're not sure exactly what it's going to look like. But I will say one of the greatest design tensions between like in this game is creating, I don't know how to say this, like basically it seems like there are like a lot of concepts that are tied to it, and to illustrate the concepts, the game is usually, to most effectively illustrate certain concepts, the game has to be not fun. And then but then you're thinking about the player, you're thinking about the game, and you're thinking about the fact that it's not fun. And like I know like calling a game a game and calling an art is like hairy, but like the more artful the game is, the less gameful it is, and the more gameful it is, the less artful it is necessarily.
I guess, I mean, I feel like games are art, there's no question.
No, absolutely. But I just mean like the more intense you're tied to illustrating a concept, like it would be like less fun for like a gamer to play, if that makes sense. So
it's like how intellectually it's engaged with. Well, right? Yeah, just how like much you're engaging with it like mentally, I guess, versus like like sort of with the gut of like
like another example of
viscerally.
This was that we were gonna not have the game ever end. You were basically just gonna oscillate between acts 1, 2, and 3, depending on how the cycle went. And then we were just like, wow, that makes a lot of fun conceptually. That makes a lot of sense conceptually. It might be funner to have an actual ending and a culmination, so that the player isn't just like stuck doing the same things over and over again.
But then when someone would get to act 3 and do something wrong, it would send them back to act 2. They'd be like, oh, well, how do I get through again? And we'd have to be like, well, you have to serve your time in prison, get kicked back to act 1, get sent to prison again, serve through your time, and then you can get back to act 3. And they would all just be like,
I'm not doing
that. Okay, and like put down the game, because like, why would anyone do that? So it's like trying to hit that perfect middle, because like, I feel like a lot of people who make like art games are like, but it doesn't matter if it's fun, it has to be like interesting. And a lot of people who make like more arcadey games are kind of like, it doesn't matter what it's about, like it just has to feel good. But like kind of very intentionally trying to like walk that line of like hitting both, which is like very difficult to do. But
I think it's already hard to like, I feel like I think the exciting thing nowadays is a lot of people are crossing genres. Like for example, Thousand Deaths is like part platformer and part like narrative, and it's like you got the speedrunner who's gonna click through all the narrative, and you got the like narrative person who's just gonna be like pretty slow at the puzzles, but like picking the choices. And like here, the challenge is already between like narrative and like arcade, and then we also have this like tension of being like conceptual versus like funner to play. So anyway, everything you see here is like functionality that we've built that we're going to try to recycle in a way that makes more sense to the game's original intent, and is hopefully less tedious for the player. Yeah,
all of which is to say, currently the prison is like sort of this cycle of mini games, but when Ben first pitched it to us, he was like, you know how like in a JRPG, there's always a section where you get sent to jail, but jail is always just like a cutscene where someone comes up to the bars and then you leave. We're like, yeah, that makes sense. He's like, well, I want to make a game where you get sent to jail and they just don't let you out. And you just are stuck in your cell for like 20 minutes with nothing to do. And like, obviously,
It's not going to literally be 20 minutes.
Yeah.
but the idea is like sort of that you're stuck in your cell for a long time and you have to start pacing around. I'm explaining this before I do anything because the tuning is such that like it's a little too immediate right now. You'll see when I start walking, but like the idea is sort of that you're supposed to be in your cell and just start walking around because you have nothing else to do. And as you're walking around, you start having a daydream. And like the more you pace around, the more you kind of like fade into this other world, which like as it is, because people were missing it and it was too easy not to even do anything, we made it so it immediately starts fading in. But I feel like that kind of does a disservice to that whole concept of it.
Right now, like the live challenge we have about this level is like, we want it to be about idleness. But how do you play idleness?
Yeah.
When idleness is about doing nothing and playing is about killing idleness.
Yeah.
And I feel like part of the solution at least is sort of having to really like juice up part one to the extent where like by the time someone gets here, we'll sort of have like earned their trust where they'll be like, okay, like let me see where you're going with this, instead of just immediately being like, this is what you want me to do, like I'm done.
So what's happening here, it would make more sense if you could play the game, but these are the arrows that flash when you have emergencies, and characters turn dark when they die. So it's like a harkening back to Act 1 where you go up to all the people, but they die before you even reach them. Yeah,
it's like a bad dream. Your motion is like a little bit slower than anywhere else in the game. And you're just in this room full of people who you're supposed to rescue, and they just all, you just don't get there in time. It's like kind of a nightmare.
Oh, and there's your object.
Right, and there's an object that presumably you would have stolen in Act 1. So the idea is like whatever object that you stole in Act 1 will decide which daydream shows up in Act 2. So if you steal the mirror, every object is tied to its own special specific daydream. Every time you steal the mirror, you see that daydream. And I think there's like over like 50 items and 50 vignettes that go with each of those daydreams.
Yeah, those are like kind of the heart of the game, which I feel like we have to figure out how to really like showcase better, or like sort of like build up to better, because like the game itself, like each act kind of has one setting where it happens, and like there's little like different buildings or whatever, but it's pretty monotonous. But these daydreams, like some of the daydreams are completely like insane. Like
some of them are ordinary, some of them are surreal, some of them are nonsense.
Like some of them are really elaborate.
No, this is happening in the
game.
This is prison.
Yeah.
This is what prison's like.
So this in one day you will go through a daydream. You will go through
currently
the prison yard work, which is just like walking around to power like an electrical engine. And then this is the other tedious task, which is that you have to power an assembly line. And in the assembly line, what you're basically doing is fabricating objects to like distribute to the world, and of course they're going to be the objects that you stole. And
but it's like, we kind of realized that this section feels a little like it's kind of just leading you from thing to thing, like in a compulsive way, but none of it really leaves you with anything. So it's like, I don't know, it's hard to like latch on to anything or anything to really feel special. And if it lost that sense of like just pacing and waiting for something, and the thing that replaced it isn't like super engaging and great, it's just kind of like, well, we should sort of just wipe some of this then and rebuild it from scratch partially.
We might still have these interactions about, like, one idea we were entertaining was like, screw the entire like routine system for Act 2, just make it sort of like open world-ish, and all these interactive, like all these will be like miniature interactions that you can engage in, but you're not obliged to do them in like a routine like timing base. We're not really sure what to do yet, and
we had a long call last night talking about it, and there's ideas, but nothing. It's one of those things where I feel like
was it last night?
It was last night.
Oh my god. Okay.
It's one of those things where I feel like when it comes, it'll just like come, and trying to come up with an idea too quickly will just like come up with more.
We're like, if we try too hard, we're gonna do a bad job. That's what we thought about.
That's true. Yeah.
Because like the whole point is to make something that's kind of like empty. So this is
okay. So
the mechanical.
This is the third section of a day in the life of prison, which is the cafeteria, in which you walk around and talk to prisoners, and they all have random dialogues that pull from a spreadsheet. If you talk to the right person, they'll be seeking the item that you extracted from your daydream, and they'll trade you a golden spoon.
A golden spoon.
Yes.
Golden spoon.
Right out of fairy tales.
So now you're back in your cell at the end.
Oh, you
of
got the golden spoon.
Yes.
So you don't know who it is, but if you encounter them, so
You use the golden spoon.
to chip away at a little hole in your
Dig a
cell.
little hole in the corner of your room.
Oh, reminds me of a certain movie, but I won't say the name of it.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Digging your way out of jail is many stories.
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah.
So this is day 2 of your whatever sentence.
Yeah, which I'll just skip to the next.
So, day 2 of 39, you have to go through these 3 challenges 39 times?
Well,
you basically
no.
you would have a sentence of 39, but you could basically find a spoon once a day and get out of there.
But also,
Good luck, you can get out of there.
Sounds like you need to get, based on the UI, I can see there's 3 slots for spoons on the right.
Mhm.
So I would assume that when I get all those 3 spoons and chip away a little at the floor, I'm gonna
Oh my God,
get
what is
something
this?
out of that,
I haven't
right?
seen this.
yeah. Well, we'll show you in a second what comes next.
Alright.
But one thing to say is that this is because we pulled it up like in kind of a debug mode that says 39.
Oh yeah.
I think this probably will change, but like as it is, the number of days in your sentence is. We've gone through a few different changes. At one point, it was based on how many items you stole, but that was before you could only steal 3 items before the cops came. I think now it might just not even say what your sentence is. It's just like how many days you've served so far.
Yeah, we don't.
Because you just stay in prison
until you get out.
Yeah, because previously you could serve your whole term and get kicked out back to Act 1.
Okay. Oh,
I haven't seen this one.
This is
I really love that there's a frame kind of being constructed by the environment itself, which is
This is your
similar to how the UI was.
yeah. This is all. The game is all about frames.
Did you know this was going to be the next one?
No. Oh well, I did because it was the one in the factory.
The chopsticks?
Yeah.
Okay. I haven't seen this one yet. I'm so excited. So this is the player home from Act 1.
Yeah, right.
Oh, okay.
But we're in a TV studio.
Is this your day job, Gus?
This is my day job. Yeah.
Gus
This
the
is.
grip.
I work on like film sets, and it's. At one day, I was just like working on one. And I was like, this is probably an interesting type of environment to most people that don't just have to do it for mind-numbing work all the time. Like, and I know it really well, so I guess I can just make one of these for one of the daydreams. Like, the fun thing about these daydreams is that none of them have to really contextually make any sense with anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you can just have an idea for something and make it, and it doesn't have to be, like, coherent with the rest of the game, but it's just like, oh, I want to make, like, a film set. And just, it's a daydream, and you figure out what it can be within the game.
That's a really fun part of the process that you constructed for yourself.
Yeah, and we've got, like, each of these items has a daydream associated with it.
Maybe just throw in the crown, because I told Fresh we have to steal the crown. Oh wait, no, it did.
So the mirror daydream was the one we saw before.
Yeah, the
right?
first one where you couldn't save anyone.
Yeah,
Okay.
And the chopstick daydream is you're on set, I guess.
yeah. This is, the fun thing about the daydreams is that so many of them are so weird that there have been like at least 10 times where we've like made one and been like, this is the most crazy one yet. People are gonna lose their minds when they see this. And then like the next one is just crazier, but it's easy to lose sight of what's interesting when you've seen it a bunch of times. But I was pretty proud of myself when I made this one.
You were pretty what with yourself?
I was pretty proud of myself, pretty chuffed when I made this one.
Awesome.
The funny thing
Cannot
was,
wait.
I feel like Gus was working on this scene at Gumbo.
Oh yeah, you were there when I was working
and
on
I
this.
were working as Pariah Interactive at Gumbo before we had the studio space. And Blake was with us too. And I think Blake knew that we were working on a game, but they have been looking on Gus's screen such that they only saw the daydream. So they had a very false impression of what the game was about.
I remember this now.
Right, I completely forgot that you actually have seen this level before.
I remember the Game Boy frame.
Yeah.
So Blake thought this was like what a tragic accident of still life was. Mostly it was just a Game Boy game, or just like.
It's just like this fake JRPG.
Oh, that's so cool. A game within a game.
Yeah.
And then there's this kind of theme going with this like a dream within a dream and a game within a game. It's just
They're not all like that. We just
Yeah.
happen to pick the meta ones, I guess.
Yeah. But there's a lot of like framing, like visually everything's got like a frame on it. There's I think like density and like things containing things is sort of something that we like to work with a lot.
Is that the guy who gives Zelda or Link the sword?
It's
Take
probably
this,
a very similar.
Please don't go. It's not safe to go alone or something.
That's probably a very similar type of guy. I feel like there's only so many.
You
The
weren't
nice thing
citing
about-
anything specific.
No, I mean this is if anything was supposed to look like a Dragon Warrior 1 and 2, but
Okay.
it's like I feel like at this resolution there's only so many like actual permutations there can be. So
True.
like
Feel like-
a wizard in like 16 by 16 is gonna look pretty universally like the same unless you make some really drastic choices.
Every SNES JRPG hero has hair that looks like bananas with like a bandana around it.
Yeah. we
That one
all
looks more
know
like
the
Professor
guys.
Oak, but
yeah,
like doesn't that look like Professor Oak?
it really does.
You talk to the king and he becomes the monster.
Oh.
And the funny thing is this is all like fake. There's no actual like gameplay to this, but it's just like everything
those
progresses
letters are just
something.
fake.
Yeah, there's no real text. It's just like this like sort of fun. And then the crown shows up.
Oh, cool. Oh, wow. And then you're back.
Mhm.
And then you do all this stuff again that we won't make you suffer through.
Yeah. Which like is I think part of the realization is like, oh, if it doesn't feel fun enough to be showing somebody and not have to be like, sorry, hold on, like we'll get to the next section. Like, should it really be in the game? Especially a game of this scale where like it doesn't make sense to have.
Making a game is so scary because like it's like, oh my god, it needs to work. And then once it works, it's like, oh my god, it's not fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or no
But-
one understands it.
So if you did your whole 3 times, you break out into the sewers and you just escape from jail. And it's Act 3.
This is Act 3.
Now you're back in your house. But your house is different. The TV's right in the middle now. Or is this your house? This is somewhere else.
This is like an apartment.
It's an apartment.
Yeah.
Where? So check the map. I'm just curious.
Yeah, where are we? We're still.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's in Oklahoma. Is that normal?
I feel like that's probably a coincidence because I like
Okay.
loaded out and then loaded in.
Usually, when you escape jail, you end up at a random state.
Yeah.
Oh.
So what's going on is that you're fleeing from the cops, and you're trying to make money as fast as possible. So what you do is you like watch TV and you like flip items. I guess you like they materialize and you sell them for money. You can see at the bottom that prescription medicine was $92.
Like you buy things off of infomercials and then you like resell them online and
Oh, I see. Yep. So you're kind of running I guess it's not junk. This is like second-hand store or something like that.
yeah, basically. And it's like each of the different items sort of has a different price point. So it's like some of the things you can buy aren't really worth the time to walk down the hallway and send them.
Mhm.
And then some of them like really are. So it kind of becomes this little, it wasn't initially like that, but it's sort of become more of a game of like, sometimes you want to just keep on going until you find a really good one. Be like, I don't know if headphones would be worth that much. Like a cell phone.
Cell
like,
phone, right?
I guess, but like, look at that. It's
What's
like
a
a
flip
flip phone.
You want the iPhone latest?
Yeah, that's a kind of a nice like brass candlestick. Like this will be worth something, I'm sure.
It'll be worth more than the flip phone.
I think so. I
If
want
it's
to
like
talk to
24 karat gold versus a flip phone, you know?
Yeah,
I have
Yeah,
no
I
idea.
guess that's
I don't
true.
remember the
313, 5. It was like 200 something.
That's not bad
It's not bad for a
for
candle.
a candle
Yeah.
holder.
But so you save up money and again, this act will also change, I'm sure, but the basic mechanic is it sort of sends you to this like pinball pool mechanic. Oh, it should have zoomed
Yeah,
out.
we're not zoomed out all the way.
Yeah. Hopefully this is all just because we loaded a debugger and not a problem with this build, but
Okay.
we'll see.
I don't think we should give away the ending.
Yeah, I won't. But it's like this like
Oh,
pinball.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you hear the sounds, it's like clanging, like a.
Yeah, the sound in that like really makes it, I think.
Oh, and we weren't able to notice that.
Oh, the crown. This is a prime example of going from $0 to
Had we zoomed out on that map, you would have seen like a cop car just slowly coming towards you from a different
Oh,
direction.
so you
Yeah.
have to shoot out quickly.
yeah.
Oh, the crown is worth a lot. Okay.
Yeah, of course.
And what's
crown's
up
where
with
it's
the three? Again, there's 3 UI slots on the right side of the frame.
So I would fly again.
Yeah. I hate that it's not zoomed out because it
Yeah.
doesn't really give you a sense of what's going on here.
Oh, but I can see the cop.
You can see where the cop
off-screen
is.
indicator
Yep.
of those indicators.
And there's something here that's like trying to, oh my god, sorry.
No.
You're
We're now
getting
in
closer to the
Missouri.
cops.
There's a bunch of bugs here.
There's a bunch of bugs here.
Oh
It's not working.
no!
Oh, there.
Oh, okay.
See, one of the things on the right filled up, it's a airport.
You
You fly
can
out to-
flight.
Alaska, where it's kind of more secluded, you know?
Nice. And now the cop meter on the left side, they're not even in the picture there.
Yeah. That also is kind of buggy looking, but yeah,
Yeah, it's just like on. It should just be at that bottom.
yeah. All of this is games in development.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
but then it keeps going, and it's like something does happen when you fill up those 3 strikes.
And that's the
the-
big reveal.
Yeah, the end of the game, where it's like initially the idea was that it was only this cycle, and like you just play this section until you get caught by the police and you go back to jail, and then
Yeah.
you go back to Act 1, and then you go through. And sort of the ending was initially like, oh, maybe there's a way to escape it from the cycle, and then sort of eventually we were like, is the cycle even really necessary though? Like, or should it just be like the end of the game that you can get to from here?
Yeah, so instead of putting everyone through hell, we just made an ending.
Yeah.
Um,
And when you get caught, we replaced that with something that I think is more fun, that all let the cops catch you for now. And
let's go stand at the curtains. Okay, they're already like on their way.
yeah.
What is it that you, if you had to describe like something that people take away from the game, what would that be? It doesn't, I mean, maybe you don't have anything specific, but I'm just curious.
That's a good question.
I mean, Ben would have an immediate answer because he's thought it over the most thoroughly. I think it's
It's too cold way past the.
I don't know.
It's buggy.
It's supposed to kind of, I think, just sort of make you think about. That's a terrible way to explain what a game should do. The idea is sort of to just like reflect like the balance in life of like the things you have to do and the things that you do to escape from the things you have to do, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I see, yeah.
And like, it's sort of kind of trying to do this like subtle thing between where like the thing that you have to do is the thing that will keep the game going and be fun, and the thing that is sort of the escape will release the tension, and then kind of eventually you realize, oh, there's nothing to do here, and so you go back into your job. So I don't know, it's sort of just like playing with that weird balance. I don't know that there's a explicit like lesson or like takeaway. I feel like that's kind of a doomed. If you're making a piece of work that has like a succinct thing that you can say, this is what I want people to take away from it, you would be better off just telling people that sentence to their face.
That's true. Because everyone's gonna have their own way of interpreting literally anything, right?
It's like, if it could be said through not a video game, there would be no reason to make it a video game.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of just kind of expressing this cloud of ideas.
I love that.
I'm most proud of that animation, I think, of anything in the game, of that like somersaulting out of the cab door that like boings open. Yeah, so whereas previously getting caught would make you go through the whole cycle again, now it just makes you have to bust out of the cop car and then start this section again.
back at it again.
Yeah. And it like keeps track of the places you've gone to. Yeah. And one thing we talked about initially that's sort of been like backgrounded a little bit now that would be nice to bring back is like all of these scores at the bottom sort of wanting to be a little like opaque and a little like, what do these numbers mean? Like, what's the point of this? And like the idea of a high score game where you can't really tell how you're getting a score, and there are 20 scores, and like you get the game over and it gives you this whole array of scores, and then like somehow picks your score from them, and you have to be like, make it not easy to be like, oh, what could I have done differently to get a higher score? Where it's not like, oh, survived longer, killed more enemies, but it's like, would I have done better if I had been to more states? Like, or would that be a higher value than if I had like saved more people's lives in the beginning? Or like, I don't know, the idea of this as a high score game has always been interesting to me.
Is that the point though, right? I guess that is still a question that's open up in the air for you all, but
I feel like for like a player like me who likes to see all this stuff, that all the scenes that the game has, it'd be like, oh, I'd want to steal every single item to see what happens in the daydreams. That would be my motivation more than a high score.
Yeah.
But the only way to do it is you have to replay it multiple times.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
And then you have to understand also that the final item you steal is what you get the daydream about later in Act 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there'd be a lot of replays, but that's
I think a question like that is hard for me to answer specifically because I have more fun working on a game than playing one. And like, for me, the game is like making this dense system with my friends. And so it's like, it's good that Ben and Lillyan are on the team to kind of balance that out, where they're like, no, the player has to have fun too. Like, it can't just be like, what's this interesting like network that you can build like for your own head. Like, there is going to be the question of like, oh, what does the player take away from it? Like, I know what I'm taking away from making it, and it's like having a great time and like making this thing that has its own little like logic, and trying to not lose that while still making something that somebody who sits down and plays it who isn't me and doesn't have my points of reference can also enjoy in their own way. Yeah.
Comes back to that whole tug of war between the fun aspect and concept aspect of it all, right? What you kind of want both, but they're totally at odds with each other in a lot of ways. So what's the next step with this game? Like, are you planning to release it anytime soon, or is it still, ongoing? Yeah.
We need to fix Act 2.
Yeah, it's definitely still ongoing.
Yeah.
But you're gonna show it soon in Korea, is that right?
That's right. We're taking it to Busan, South Korea to show, which will be interesting in its own way because it seems like the festival where we're showing it is very like gamer focused.
I was very surprised that they accepted us. I did not think the East Asian audience would be into this enough to accept it to its festival, but
I mean, it's very much. It literally says America on the screen right now. I feel like East Asia. There's this. You look at America, as like a fantastical land.
Interesting, yeah.
And what's interesting about this game is that like it kind of takes away all that fantastical stuff and shows you the most like commonplace part of America.
You just gotta make your money.
Well,
if you do bad stuff, the police come get you.
Right, yeah.
You just gotta keep moving based off of the things that you need to do to stay alive.
That's kind of a thing that we've like talked a lot about, honestly, where it's like some people in the game sphere will say something sort of like, I don't want to say any names or cause any strife,
Whoa.
but
the tea.
I've seen famous people on the internet talk about like, oh, we don't need more video games about America because there's so many video games about America. But like, there really aren't. Like, there are video games set in like New York City, but that's not about America. Mm-hmm. Like, there's Kentucky Route Zero.
They're talking, I mean,
like Grand Theft Auto is about America, but it's not about like the life of anyone that I've ever met. Like, if you didn't grow up in a city or fabulously wealthy, like you're not reflected as an American in a video game really anywhere. Yeah. So it's like sort of trying to make something that hits that niche of like, oh, this is like a story that huge populations of people on this planet would maybe resonate with, like having a job that just kind of is a vehicle for you to have to just carry out your compulsions and like having to do things that are just boring to like tread water to make money. And it's sort of this like, I don't know, the Americana is a very different thing than
to be specific, of course, like the United States means very different things to very different people.
Right.
There's a lot of different narratives going on, but this is like sort of one slice of maybe a tale that isn't super uncommon, particularly like, I mean, we take a lot of influences from like the Midwest here, because Ben is from Ohio, and that's just throwing out, that's a particular slice of life.
Right.
Yeah. But that's an interesting point you've touched on there, that there really isn't something that shows America in this way that I can think of the top of my head. Maybe if I dug a little, I could find a game, but I think most games kind of lean towards fantasy and escapism, and that results in a GTA where you can steal cars, make millions of dollars, buy houses. But this is also fantasy and escapism where you're...
It's like the anti-GTA, where you're just like driving around and stealing stuff and just getting caught and going to jail instead.
Like, it's about the ways that people can actually feasibly do escapism in their real lives.
Yeah, right.
Without having like a fantasy of a game, but it is a game about the things that you can do without turning into a game. So it's like, again, this sort of like a box inside of a box, like a book about a book.
Yes.
It's Borges, etc., etc.
Right. Yeah, we could get into that. But, we're almost at the end of the hour, so let's wrap. And thanks again, Gus and Lillyan, for coming and showing a game, A Tragic Accidental Still Life, which will be out Sunday.
Yeah.
and we'll be in
Someday.
South Korea. What are the dates?
I think we're going to be there September 1st through 4th.
Mhm.
And then the festival will be up online through September 30th, I want to say.
Oh, cool.
It's Busan
know
Indie
dates.
Connect. Check it out on the old internet.
Awesome. And is there anywhere else the game is touring anytime soon that you know of?
We
Then
took,
we're
it
gonna
to,
come back
we
in.
took it to MagFest earlier
Yeah.
this year. It got honorable mention at a Maze this year, and
Nice.
South Korea's next. So
We're going to show it there and then take it home and fix it. And
yeah.
maybe finish it and then keep
Ooh.
bringing it to more places.
Yeah.
Awesome. Love to hear
More
that.
surgery before presentation. We needed
Yeah.
time for surgery. So.
Each time that you show it to someone, it kind of reveals more of the things that need to be changed. And like,
It's gonna be so interesting testing it in
yeah.
Korea.
Yeah.
Like, I
Like-
want them to be brutal. And they, I feel
That's
like,
when we were talking about like, oh, how do we fix Act 2? I kind of in my head kept on being like, we shouldn't even try now because like the answer is going to come to us at like 4 a.m.
When
in
we're in
Korea.
person.
Like,
Yeah.
obviously, like we shouldn't waste our time trying to get an answer before then because
yeah.
Yeah.
I
there's
feel like
one. It's on the other side of the
we
planet.
came up
which
with the
doesn't go there.
we came up with the ending at like maybe like 9 in the morning, like at MagFest in
Yeah.
person. So nothing like working in person during the day and age of COVID and remote work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again. And commonopera.com is where people can find your games. And I believe they're all free to download. So check it out. And yeah, thanks again.
Thank you.
Awesome.